welcome back to another video. I remember growing up, we had things like the Scholastic Book Fair. You know, books were all the rave. Everybody had their favorite book that they loved or book series. Harry Potter was kind of big. Um, Goosebumps, Choose Your Own Adventure stories. So, Wayside School, so many different books that people liked. Most of them had no pictures or hardly any. And that was just how things were. But these days, it seems like reading is not a thing anymore. Like nobody reads books, or hardly anybody. They cringe at the thought of having to read and write. And so we're getting inching closer and closer to like an idiocracy type of reality. And maybe there's some way to turn it around, but as of right now, since kids are glued to their iPads, playing Roblox, watching TikTok, it's that's what they grew up doing because parents just throw an iPad to their kids and let them have at it, play all day, use that as the babysitter instead of them being a parent and taking care of their kids. And I have a kid of my own, and I make sure that he reads every day and that he's limited to how much, screen time he gets, because I've seen it, before I had my kid, how bad things were getting. And I had to make sure that my kid didn't struggle with that. So yeah, without further ado, let's take a look at what's going on with kids not being able to read these days.
There's a serious crisis in education today because kids are too busy 6-7ing to learn how to read at their grade level.
The kids can't read, write, or remember anything or use their imaginations, and the teachers are wondering why.
They're feral, they can't read, they're crazy.
People are putting screens in front of their children instead of books.
Why do you need two screens?
Because I can't watch YouTube on this one.
And that is...
How can you be playing Roblox and watching YouTube at the same time? That is insane. Parents cannot be doing this to their kids. They are hurting their kids' chances at growing up to be like good, productive members of society. And also with the teachers, like they're supposed to be teaching. Kids spend, half their day at school. Isn't it the teacher's job to like ensure that the kids are getting a proper education? So it's kind of like a team that like both have to try to help these kids succeed,
leading to not just a lack of literacy, but a lack of confidence and a great deal of anxiety.
Like, they don't know how to put things away. They don't know common decency.
Having to teach and work with you guys as children has been the most traumatic experience of my life.
Their future could be at risk if something doesn't change fast.
Gen Alpha can't read anything anymore.
And maybe that's just the sign of the times. Like, when I was growing up, the internet was still relatively new and there was not a lot you really did on it. You used it for like school, for education reasons. Yeah, you could play games on it, but it wasn't as big as it is today. There wasn't like YouTube when I was a kid, not yet at least. But these days, that's all there is. And why would you need to read when, you can just watch a YouTube video? Especially more nowadays when you have AI to like do the thinking for you.
You remember the days when we were in school and we were asked to do things like read books, write essays, or really just do anything that required more than 30 seconds of thinking? Well, apparently at some point since then, we've decided that doing things like that is for losers, and we'd be better off using our time teaching kids more important things.
And that's the other thing is like, I also partially blame our culture that, how do I say this? We celebrate things that are not good for us, and we push away things that are ultimately good for us. Growing up, there was a lot of movies about like partying and trying to be the most popular, cool kid in school, and the nerds were seen as losers and dorks, and you didn't want to be a nerd. So I feel like the way our culture is also contributed kids not wanting to care about like being smart or learning things.
like how to brain rot all over the place. I'm kind of joking when I say that, but not really, because I see videos like this.
Count the penguins.
Ready? Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Wow, I can't believe this is the only way kids will learn how to count, by implementing a meme. This is beyond cringe.
Maybe it's just me and my silly little goofy brain, but is it crazy that kids know a dumb trend before they know how to count? Like, it's insane to me to think I could walk up to a Gen Alpha kid and they'd have a better chance of saying 6, 7 to me than actually knowing how to count to 6 or 7. But in a way, that does feel like an appropriate reflection of our time, because Gen Alpha isn't asked to read entire books or write whole essays anymore. They're asked to write paragraphs, and sometimes they can't even do that.
The younger generation is cooked. I just watched a video of a teacher trying to tell his kids that they have to write a paragraph, not an essay, 5 sentences, and they're moaning and groaning and whining away about, oh my God, I gotta write 5 sentences.
And it's not like I downed some 4-day-old bottle of haterade and came up with all of this, but there's actual data that can empirically show this is what's happening. If we look at the NAEP, which is the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 40% of 4th graders are now reading below the NAEP basic level. That is the lowest possible level, by the way. And for reference, if you're reading below the basic level, that probably means you can't identify the main point of a paragraph or a character's motivations in a story. So it's pretty...
I used to feel stupid whenever I got back like my grades and it showed that I was like struggling with certain subjects. I used to feel like a loser, and that brought me shame, and it made me want to like get smarter and like fix that. But nowadays, I guess since everybody's struggling, what's the point, you know?
Pretty much the same reading level as you see on X or on Instagram threads. On top of that, for 8th graders, it's even worse. 1/3 of them are below basic, which is the highest percentage ever recorded in 32 years of testing. Then if you go to the place with the most educated, the smartest, the most genius humans of all time, if you go to the place where they're all hanging out, they will say the same thing. And of course, I'm talking about TikTok.
Yep, that's the mecca for the brightest minds in all the world. You will find experts in just about everything. Hell, you'll find certain channels or people that know everything. You know, they're medical experts, science experts, math experts, car experts, political experts. They know it all.
There are a whole bunch of teachers on there who, for lack of a better word, are saying how sucky Gen Alpha is at reading and overall just comprehension in general.
But isn't that your job as a teacher, to teach them how to properly read and write and do math and learn history? Isn't that your job as a teacher to pinpoint where they're struggling and help them to like figure it out and understand? I feel like that's it, not just like throw a sheet at them and be like, okay, write me a paragraph about this or read this many pages out of this book. Like, weren't you supposed to help them develop those skills so they know how to do it?
It feels like teaching an entire generation of weaponized incompetence. Because what do you mean you can't just reread the directions that I strained my voice to read out loud 3 times? What do you mean you can't just look at the rubric that I made that shows you exactly how to get a grade? And I said if you even wrote a few sentences, you could get a 1, which is a D. The security guard stopped by and he was kind of like shocked at how confused the kids were. It's an alternate ending to the
So you mean to tell me that these days you will get a D or like a passing grade technically by just writing down a sentence or two? Hell, writing your name down will get you a passing grade, and that's still too much, too hard for these kids? Yeah, we're definitely living in idiocracy, or we're going to be there by the time Gen Alpha grows up and take over the world.
Outsiders. You get to do whatever you want, and you were given enough information, notice, and preparation. Now you can just sit down and write anything you want. Ponyboy does this, Johnny doesn't die, whatever you want to do.
It doesn't even need to be about the subject. You can just literally write anything. You can write what you did last night, your favorite video game, when the subject is about, history. You don't even have to be on track with the subject. You could just do whatever and they'll pass you along. But again, I feel like it's a team effort. Parents and teachers are supposed to be working together to helping these kids succeed. I don't understand why they make it seem like, oh, these kids are supposed to already know how to do these things. Why aren't they doing it? I give them a task to do and they can't do it. But we're also, evolving with the times. And if the times call for not needing to know how to read, and TikTok is, you need to just know how to, work a phone, work a tablet, press buttons like the Jetsons, then that's what society would shape into. So reading is not important. And now with AI especially, AI does the thinking for you. So why need to know how to do that stuff?
And they're just sitting there like this. And I can't help that. And so I just told him, like, you need to pick up the pencil and write. I can't help you. You need to pick up the pencil and write.
But you're the teacher. What do you mean you can't help them? You gotta do something. That's what you're paid to do.
Yeah, somehow these Gen Alpha kids can navigate an iPad with an incredible amount of complexity and dexterity, but then you show them a sentence that's longer than 5 words and their brain has to reboot. It crashes. You have to give them like 15 minutes before they can even speak again. So based off of all of that, here's the question that I have. How did we raise the first generation of kids who grew up fully online and now they can't read? Before we go any further, I want to address something. I know that every generation says that the next generation can't do something, or they're always dogging on the generation that comes after them.
Yeah, that's what I experienced when I was growing up. Like the adults would be like, you kids today have it so easy. I can't believe you don't know how to fix a car. When I was 7 years old, we knew how to take it apart and put it back together and then walk 15 miles uphill both ways to get to school. You kids today have it too easy. You can't do cursive. Well, I that's all how I write is in cursive. Personally, I feel it's easier than like writing normally, so you don't have to lift the pencil off the paper. You could just smoothly glide across. But yeah, cursive doesn't exist anymore. They killed that.
Say millennials killed cursive. They say Gen Z killed phone calls. Gen Alpha killed the ability to communicate normally without referencing some dumb trend that makes everyone's IQ lower. It is what it is.
Skibbity toilet riz, W Sigma. Livy Dunn rizzing up baby Gronk, while Duke Dennis is wittily gwittying outside, no phantom tax on Skibbity.
But in this case, I'm not.
To be fair, we had also slang and words that like the previous generation would be like, I don't know what you're saying. Speak proper English. And I'm sure Gen Z and the generation before them had their way of talk. It's just how it is. Every generation has their like way of talking, and then eventually you grow out of it. Grow out of it because it's kind of cringe when you're like 40 years old trying to talk like you did when you were like a teenager. But every generation had their kind of way of talking that the previous generation would find, cringy or whatever.
Not just being a boomer. Like I mentioned before with the NAEP scores, we can actually empirically see that they're getting worse at reading. And don't get me wrong, I don't have a doctorate or a PhD in looking at numbers.
In my opinion, I think when the Department of Education took over, that's when you started to see like the stupefying trend, and we got dumber and dumber and dumber. Because I feel like before then, teachers had more control over how they taught, and they can pinpoint and really focus down to each student to teach in a way that they would understand and help them learn better and have broader ideas and more critical thinking. But since the Department of Education took over, they kind of did like a blanket across the board, like, this is how you have to learn things. You can't veer away from this way. This is the only way. And you can't teach beyond that. And you can't use, your method to teach these kids things. You have to teach what's out of this curriculum that we give you. I think that they did more harm than good. So maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but just because we call it the Department of Education doesn't mean that they're like all knowing and they know what's right for kids. Yeah.
But this definitely does not look good. And maybe you're looking at me and you're thinking this is just a good old red-blooded American problem. Like maybe we're just too busy letting freedom ring to pick up a book and read a few words in it. Well, you'd be wrong if you thought that, because this is a global problem. The Program for International Student Assessment, or the PISA, it's a fun name, they tested 15-year-olds across dozens of countries, and they found that reading scores declined across most developed nations between 2018 and 2022. So no, this isn't just some vibes we're feeling. This isn't just some energy that's being put into the universe. This is something we can see, physically see, empirically see that is happening.
Yeah, because their respected governments say that you have to learn this specific way. Like when I was growing up, I would solve these math equations in a way that made sense to me, but I would still get a failing grade because it wasn't done the way that the teacher said it had to be done by, even though I came to the right answer. And so it really confused me a lot and made learning more difficult. But as soon as I started to learn it in a way that made sense for me, I started to understand it easier. So we got to get away from that. And that's one factor that I feel is contributing to kids getting dumber.
That means at the end of the day, the question isn't if there is a literacy crisis. The question is what caused it. Here's the thing about the literacy decline that a lot of people may get wrong. It didn't start with the pandemic. I mean, sure, the pandemic made it worse, a lot worse, but the trend was already here.
Yeah, I feel like since the 70s and 80s, as far back as then.
Scores have been essentially flat or declining since the early 2010s. The 2024 NAEP scores are roughly where they were in 1992. So that means in 30 years of potential progress, we actually haven't made progress. We
regressed.
Regression. That's what we've done. So what changed? Well, honestly, I don't think it takes some super genius megamind to figure out what happened. Around 2012, something shifted. And here's a little video that maybe will allude, or maybe it'll give you a little hint about what that shift was.
This day was the day that the gates of hell opened. This was the day that America died. The world died. The day, as you know, they say in biblical terms, the rapture. This day, when the iPhone came out, was the beginning of the end to society all across the world.
We're introducing 3 revolutionary products of this class. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. And here it is.
Is that really how it's supposed to look like? That's got to be a joke. That's freaking hilarious.
In 2012, teen smartphone ownership crossed the 50% threshold. By 2018, it was 95%. Who would have guessed that giving kids phones and allowing them to nomadically travel across the whole wide web world internet wouldn't be a good idea? Who would have guessed that? Not me. I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have thought it was good. Maybe. I don't know. And here's where things start to get a little bit more interesting. The kids who took the 2024 NAEP reading tests, they were in kindergarten when the pandemic started. Their entire literacy foundation was built during remote learning, Zoom fatigue, and reduced instructional time. So pretty much their whole literacy foundation was built on a big, massive heaping pile of dumb.
Yeah, I mean, if that's all they knew starting out, then makes sense why that's all they want to know and keep knowing, and why they feel like being on a phone or tablet is the only way.
With a side of cornbread. So the pandemic didn't create the problem, but it did accelerate. It took trends that we saw that were already a little bit concerning and it compressed them into a very short amount of time.
We have got to stop blaming COVID for kids not being able to read and write on grade level. Let's be clear. Kids were not reading and writing on grade level before COVID. It's just that COVID exposed how bad the educational system had become at that time.
Yeah, the Department of Education really did more harm than good. And it started since its beginnings. You could look at the graph, how ever since then, you know, our education levels went down and down and down. Yeah, they got significantly worse in the last 5 to 10 years, but it's been a trend since, you know, I think 72 or around then when the department was established.
But it is not COVID's fault. Teachers have been being forced to pass kids along, give away free grades. Let's call a spade if we're going to talk about education. Don't blame COVID for decisions that the school board is making. Don't blame COVID for decisions the Department of Education is making. Okay? COVID just exposed where we are in education. Kids were not reading and writing on grade level years before that, okay? You're passing kids along through a system and you're expecting them to get what they need. It's not going to happen. And you can't blame teachers either, because teachers, our hands are forced. And you can't blame parents, because parents actually don't even know what's really going on in the school system. Stop blaming COVID.
But something deeper was happening than just these test scores. Something was happening to attention itself. You've probably at some point in your life heard the statistic that humans have a shorter attention span than goldfish. Well,
yeah, I don't know how they came up with that, like how we like measured goldfish's attention span. But I feel when you train your brain to watch small clips, short content, you're training the brain to, like, you know, desire that more and to not bother to hold on to information beyond that. And that's why reading's so important, because when you're reading, you're forced to put all your attention to it, and it helps you retain that information longer. When you're watching a YouTube video or a TikTok video and you're just doom scrolling, your brain's getting used to just absorbing, you know, 10 seconds to a minute of information and then dropping it for the next bit of information. Because when your brain doesn't find it important to remember, it's just going to get overwritten by the next thing that you look at.
that statistic is complete phooey. I poo-poo that statistic. It's not right. As it turns out, that statistic is completely and fully made up, allegedly. It actually came from a Microsoft report that cited a website called Statistic Brain, which cited no actual research. Multiple journalists have tried to trace the source and found nothing. Also, maybe this...
I think because of how fish look all goofy, like, they assume that they're like incapable of, you know, having attention. Or, you know, when they were given like fish food, they would like bite at it and then like wander off for a second and then be like, oh yeah, food, come back to it. So that's what I assume they base it off of.
It's just me and, again, my silly little dumb goofy brain, but do we actually have a way to accurately measure a goldfish's attention span?
That's
like,
what
is
I'm
that
saying.
something
How
we
do
can
that?
do? Because as far as I know, goldfish aren't really known for filling out surveys. I haven't seen them do that. But speaking about attention and all of that, here's what is true. Attention isn't shrinking, it's fragmenting.
Because that's what we're training our brains to do, to only care about small snippets of information at a time instead of full on, you know, research or absorption of information. And when you have like a quick Google search to get a quick answer in just a short summary, that's what our brains, retain. And that's why everybody's an expert at everything, because they can just Google or ask AI. And no matter what, it's going to give you the answer you want, not the truth, not the facts, but the facts that you want to hear, which it could be complete bullshit, but because it's confirmation bias and that's what you want, because you want to feel smart, that's what you're going to get.
Cognitive neuroscientist Marianne Wolf, author of Reader Come Home, has spent decades studying what she calls the reading brain. And her research shows something that's pretty interesting, it's pretty fascinating. It shows that reading isn't natural. There's no gene for literacy. The brain has to be trained over years to do something it wasn't designed to do.
Well, yeah, because we invented, language and writing. So that was something that we had to train ourselves to do. We weren't born already knowing how to do it. Babies aren't born speaking fluent English or whatever language that they're, around. They have to be taught that. So that's why it's a trained thing, it's a learned thing.
So for all of you people out there who don't read and who pride themselves in not reading, congratulations in leaning into your natural instinct. I applaud that. I applaud getting in touch with yourself. That's very holistic medicine of you. But yeah, reading requires a level of sustained attention, working memory, and the ability to hold ambiguity while you wait for a resolution. It requires what Wolf calls deep reading. The slow contemplative processing that allows us to understand complex ideas and crucially to develop empathy. Now think about what all the...
Yeah, and that develops critical thinking. When you're, are good at critical thinking and you're good at research and finding the facts and things by comparing different information that you get, rather than just like the first link that you come across when you Google give me the answer to this, but you write it out in such a way that it's going to give you your truth versus the truth. That's why everybody thinks they're right, despite having opposing, opinions on something. And critical thinking's gone.
Kids are doing nowadays, how they're all on their little TikToks watching short form content, and think about what this short form content trains. Novelty scanning, dopamine seeking, rapid context switching, the ability to process surface level information very quickly and then move on to the next thing. And I guess in some kind of way, these maybe could be useful skills. I can't think of anything off the top of my head where a person with a 3.27 second long attention span would be beneficial. I can't think of a single thing like that, but I'm sure there is something.
Maybe we'll just develop society to make that a skill that's needed. And no longer do we have to commit, hours or weeks or months of time into learning something. We could just get the answer instantaneously and we do it in the moment that we need it and then throw it away when it's no longer relevant to us. That's why, again, I say the education system's flawed, because all it is, it's like a memorization and regurgitation system where it just teaches you to memorize things in the moment, be able to regurgitate it later to pass a test. And when you no longer use it or need it, you throw it away, you forget it. That's why most people my age, any age really, can't, tell you things that they learned in school. They can't tell you, where the specific countries are on a map. They can't tell you the history that they learned in school. They can't solve certain math equations that they learned, in math class in high school or in college. They learned it in the moment, and when it was no longer relevant, the brain just forgot about it, because it's something you have to train. And like being an athlete, you got to keep working at it every day, and when you stop doing it, you kind of atrophy it. And your brain's a complex device that's going to not bother to retain information to make room for new information with things that you haven't tapped into in a long time.
There's something out there, like taking out the trash, maybe they're good at that. I don't know. So I'm not saying that those things are completely useless, even though I haven't found something that says the opposite. But what I am saying is that process, those things you learn, are completely different than what you get from reading. Basically, we trained kids on 15-second long brain rot videos and then handed them Frankenstein. And the data actually backs this up. Common Sense Media reports that tweens now spend an average of 5.5 hours a day on screens for entertainment. And teens, they spend over 8 hours a day on screens for entertainment. Meanwhile, the percentage of students who wrote long answers more than 5 times a year decreased between 2022 and 2024. So kids are consuming more content than they ever have before, but they're not processing it as deeply. And while one of my favorite hobbies in the whole world is blaming TikTok for things, In this case, it's not quite the whole story. There's a podcast called Sold a Story that went viral a few years ago. It documented something called the reading wars, decades of debate about how to teach kids to read. For years, many schools used an approach to literacy called balanced literacy, which de-emphasized phonics, the explicit teaching of letter-sound relationships, in favor of encouraging kids to guess words from context and pictures, which in my humble opinion, I feel like my reading skills drastically declined even just from hearing that suggestion.
Yeah, I agree. Phonics, hooked on phonics, I think was a better approach to teaching kids how to read, how to understand words, how to piece sentences together, how to make, find meaning in those things, than to be like, here's a picture of a tree. Here's the word tree. They go together. Yeah, I don't think that helps anybody.
That sounds so not good. Like, I hear that and immediately think that does not sound good.
The idea was for them to see the same words over and over again and memorize them.
And the problem with that is that extensive research shows that balanced literacy doesn't work. The science of reading movement, backed by cognitive neuroscience, has demonstrated that explicit, systematic phonics instruction is more effective, especially for people who struggle to read. And now many schools are switching back to the whole phonics system, but it's kind of too late in a sense because so many kids are stuck in this old way of teaching. They're already stuck with that foundation. So I think we're...
Yeah, you ruin their foundation. And when the foundation's ruined, it kind of made them stumble going forward. And it's hard to kind of like make them unlearn something to learn things the right way. Not impossible, but difficult.
We're gonna have like a 15-year range of people who just can't read and who can't comprehend anything. But it's okay because we probably can just corral a bunch of them up and have them push rocks or something. It might be fun to watch. There's also the educational tech explosion. During the pandemic, schools were pretty much forced to adopt these all new ways of using tech and all these new educational tech tools, tablets, apps, learning platforms, and the evidence on whether these actually improve literacy is mixed at best. It's not great. Studies show that students comprehend better from physical books than they do screens.
Yeah, because when you have to focus on like reading each word, and you're in a quiet space and you have to really absorb each word, holding the physical book in your hand, it's going to retain in your brain much better than looking at a screen where you're basically getting flashbanged, and the screen reminds them too much of like the entertainment aspect of it, so it's going to easily distract them.
Handwriting activates different parts of the brain than typing, that the very devices meant to help kids learn may be training their brains in the opposite direction. So no, it's not just TikTok that's causing this, it's curriculum, it's institutional decisions. It's a system that was already struggling, hit with the pandemic, and then you add in a bunch of devices that people don't know how to use. Not a great mixture, that's not a great recipe. Really, it just sounds like these kids got the mega uppercut of bad literacy decisions. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be alarmist about this. I don't think it's destroying our society. I don't think we're gonna collapse and vanish into thin air, even though one...
No, we're just gonna head into a idiocracy. That's where we're headed.
Day we might have an iPad kid president. But what I am trying to talk about is what literacy actually connects to. Students who can't read proficiently by 3rd grade are 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. 70% of incarcerated adults can't read at a 4th grade level. 85% of juveniles who interact with the court system are functionally illiterate.
Yes, it all connects because when you struggled in school, for whatever reason, it made finding a job or seeking a higher education more difficult. Therefore, you're put into a desperate situation where you're struggling. And so you are more likely to turn to doing crime to try to, make up for the lack of money or lack of life you want to live. But society also indoctrinates us to think that like you need to have all the money and, the best looking girl or guy and need to be the most famous or popular instead of valuing, hard work, learning, and good values. It all connects.
High school dropouts are 3.5 times more likely to be arrested than graduates. And beyond just those statistics, there's something that's a little bit harder to measure, and that's critical thinking. the ability
which doesn't exist anymore.
To evaluate sources, to distinguish good arguments from bad ones, to recognize manipulation. Deep reading, the kind that Marianne Wolf talks about, isn't just about processing words. It's about building the cognitive infrastructure for deeper thoughts. So in a sense, I think it's fair to say that reading isn't just a school subject, but it's critical infrastructure for participating in society at a functional and deeper level. And right.
Yeah, and why need to learn how to critically think when you can just type into a keyboard, I want this answer so I can be right. Give me things that support my opinion. And then you'll get a long list of links or answer that will support the answer you're trying to get. So it's not going to give the facts, it's going to give your facts, which aren't really facts, they're just opinions. But no matter what, you can get the answer you want to seek. And that's why most people, despite having opposite opinions, both believe they're right, because they both believe that they researched it, even though it was like 5 seconds of, searching for something. I believe when you're actually looking for the truth and for facts, you're going to spend a lot of time digging into the subject, learning the oppositions, learning as much as you can from it, then come up with, the solution or the answer that makes the most sense out of whatever you're researching. And you can't do it in 5 minutes.
Now that infrastructure is cracking, but there might be good news. You may or may not know this, but our brains are plastic, and I'm not talking about the plastic like what Barbie dolls are made out of. I'm saying that they're easily shaped and molded. Researchers at the University of Washington gave struggling readers an intensive 8-week tutoring program. They did MRI scans before and after, and what they found was pretty cool, actually. They found that the neural circuitry of the people they tutored actually strengthened. The white matter tracts that connect the language and vision centers of the brain showed measurable changes. 8 weeks.
So why aren't we doing this already with our kids? Why isn't this like the number one thing we're doing to shape their foundation and set them up for success, so later on in life they're not struggling to read?
That's all it took. It only took 8 weeks to start seeing physical changes in people's brains. So in 2 weeks, they went from boulder pushers to that galaxy brain meme. Other research shows that structured literacy programs based on the science of reading can close skill gaps significantly, that screen time reduction improves attention, and that physical books outperform digital ones for comprehension. So while many brains today, specifically Gen Alpha brains, may be trained to think on a quick surface level, they can be retrained to think on a deeper level. So it's not completely hopeless. We can change brains, but it actually requires us to try.
Which, I don't know if we will, but I hope so.
Which, while looking through this research and hearing what other people had to say, there is a word that I feel like kind of came up a lot. Maybe not this word directly, but pretty much this word, and that is friction. Reading has friction. It's slow. It requires effort. You have to hold ideas in your head while you wait for payoff. And in doing that, you have to tolerate one of the worst things known to mankind: boredom.
Oh God, I hate that word. I don't allow that word. I don't allow my kid to say that word, to be like, I'm bored, when I try to get him to do things that are good for him, because we're supposed to get bored. Being bored is a good thing, because then it will allow us to be more introspective. It will allow us to look inward more. It would allow us to think about the things we need to think about, take action, and help ourselves. We are supposed to be bored. We can't just cover up that boredom with entertainment. Otherwise, you get nowhere, and eventually you get desensitized to that entertainment, and you're going to be bored regardless of what you do. So boredom is a good thing.
And we've spent the last decade removing friction from everything. One-click ordering, infinite scrolls, skip intro, whatever this TikTok is. The entire attention economy is based on eliminating the space between wanting something and getting it. But friction is where reading lives. Friction is where learning lives. Friction is where deep thought lives. So maybe one of the easiest solutions to this whole reading crisis is actually just to stop giving kids unlimited access to technology and start giving them more books. Who would have guessed that? It's crazy. I know, your brain is blown, your mind's blown. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. But if you want to watch more, check out this video right here.
We used to live at a time where they would burn books to keep people from like learning things and expanding their minds. Now I feel like in the future, you know, a dictator or whatever leaders won't have to ever touch books because people will never read, never touch the books. They'd be sitting in a library with like dust on them. So, you know, that won't be an issue in the future. But thanks again for sticking with me on this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you think that you know, our kids are doomed, or if there's a way to turn things around. If there's any solution that you think would be helpful, or what your experiences were. If you like it, thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs down. Thanks again, and until next time, we'll see ya. Oh yeah, I forget. I'm going to keep doing this. Let me know if you have any tips, any way to improve myself, what you want to see. If there's any subjects you want me to cover, I'll be happy to. I want to make this a full-time thing. So yeah, I'm happy to hear all ideas, good or bad. There's no such thing as bad ideas. And I will take your criticism respectfully. So thanks again. Until next time.